Some cases get solved, some go cold, and a few of them just sit there for decades, daring you to look closer and giving you nothing back. This is one of those. It's a freezing night in February 1978. High in the mountains of Northern California, a car sits abandoned on a snowed-in forest road. It isn't crashed. It isn't stuck in any ditch. There's gas in the tank. The doors are shut. Inside there are maps and snacks and the small, ordinary mess of 5 guys on a road trip. But the 5 guys are gone. They walked away from that car, in the dark, in the snow, with the temperature far below freezing. They left behind the one thing that could have kept them alive, and they went out into the wilderness on foot. Months later, searchers would find 4 of them. What they found didn't add up. It still doesn't. And the 5th man was never found at all. People who study this case have a name for it. They call it the American Dyatlov Pass. Stay with me, because by the end of this, I don't think you'll have a clean answer. I think you'll have more questions than you started with. Let me tell you who they were first, because that matters here. Their names were Ted Weiher, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Huett, and Gary Mathias. Friends, grown men in their 20s and 30s, all from the area around Yuba City and Marysville, California. 4 of them had mild intellectual disabilities. Gary, the 5th, lived with a psychiatric condition. But on his medication, he was steady, and he was doing well. These were not survivalists. They were not hikers. They were not the kind of men who go looking for trouble in the mountains at night. They were a close group, and they shared one real passion in their lives: basketball. They had their own team. They practiced. They cared about it the way some people care about their family, because in a way, it was their family. And here's the detail that makes this whole thing so strange. The very next morning, they had a game. A big one. A tournament they'd been looking forward to for weeks. Win it. And there was talk of a trip to play in another city. These 5 men had every reason in the world to get home, get a good night's sleep, and show up the next day. Nobody disappears into a frozen forest the night before the thing they've been waiting for. On the evening of February 24th, 1978, they piled into Jack Madruga's car, a 1969 Mercury Montego, and they drove about an hour north to Chico to watch a college basketball game at the university there. By all accounts, it was a good night. They were happy. On the way back, they stopped at a small store to grab some food for the drive home. Sodas, candy bars, pies, ordinary stuff. That store was the last place anyone saw them alive. They never made it home. And when their car finally turned up, it wasn't on the road home at all. It was nowhere near it. Home was south, familiar roads, flat ground. The car was found to the northeast, 50 miles in the wrong direction, climbing up a mountain road into the Plumas National Forest, into deep snow and brutal cold. Try to make that make sense. None of the 5 had any reason to be up there. None of them knew a soul in those mountains. That road didn't lead to anyone they knew, or anywhere they'd ever been. It led to nothing but trees and snow and the dark. And it gets stranger when the investigators actually reached the car. The Montego wasn't wrecked. It wasn't buried in a snowbank. It was sitting on the road. And from everything they could tell, it could have been turned around and driven right back down the mountain. There was still fuel in the tank. The windows were fine. The food was inside. There was no damage, no blood, No sign that anyone had forced these men out of that car. So why did they leave it? Why would 5 grown men step out of a working vehicle in the freezing dark, miles from anywhere, and walk away from their only shelter, their only warmth, their only way home? There was no struggle, nothing taken. It was as if all 5 of them had simply decided, together, to get out and disappear into the snow. Now, there is one more piece from that night, and it's the piece that keeps people up at night. There was a man on that mountain road the same evening. His name was Joseph Shawns. He'd driven up there, and while he was sitting in his car, he started having chest pains. It turned out to be the beginning of a heart attack. And while he was up there, in pain, in the dark, he says he saw things. He saw headlights behind him. He heard people, voices. He says he heard a woman and what sounded like a baby. He called out for help. He asked them to help him, and the lights went out. The voices stopped. Nobody came. Whoever was out there that night, in the cold, near where that car would be found, they did not answer a dying man calling for help. And then they were gone. Was that the 5 men? Were they that close to another human being and either couldn't or wouldn't come to him? We don't know. We may never know. For weeks after they vanished, the search came up empty. Winter held the mountain shut. The snow kept its secrets. And then, in June, almost 4 months later, the snow began to melt, and the mountain started to give the men back. The first one they found was Ted Weiher. His body was inside a small Forest Service trailer, a little shelter, the kind they keep out in the back country for crews and emergencies. It sat about 19 miles from the abandoned car. 19 miles, on foot, through deep mountain snow in the dead of winter. And what they found inside that trailer is the heart of this entire mystery. Because Ted Weiher did not die that first night. Ted survived. Not for hours, for weeks. The condition of his body, the growth of his beard, the weight he had lost, all of it told the same story. He had been alive in that trailer for a long time, possibly 8 weeks, maybe longer. His feet were severely frostbitten. He had lost a staggering amount of body weight. He had wrapped himself in sheets, trying to stay warm. But here is the part that I cannot get past. That trailer had food in it, enough canned and dried food to feed a man for a year. It had matches, it had fuel, it had the means to make heat and light and a hot meal. And Ted barely touched any of it. He starved and he froze, just a few feet away from everything he needed to live. Why? Did he not understand how to use what was in there? Was he already too far gone? Too weak by the time he reached that door? Or, and this is the thought that lingers, was he afraid? Afraid to light a fire. Afraid that the smoke or the glow in the window would tell someone or something exactly where he was. Near that trailer, the searchers found 3 more of the men: Madruga, Sterling, Huett. Their remains were scattered across the mountainside. They had died out in the open, of exposure in the cold. That left one man, Gary Mathias, the only one of the 5 with a serious psychiatric history, and the only one whose body has never been recovered. His shoes were found inside that trailer, next to Ted Weiher's body. Think about what that means. At some point, Gary was in that shelter. He was there. He had Ted's company, and he had a roof, and he had food. And then, at some point, he put on someone else's footwear or left his own behind, and he walked back out into that frozen wilderness, alone. And he was never seen again. So what happened on that mountain? In more than 40 years, people have offered theories. And I'll be honest with you, not one of them closes the case. The first is simple panic. 4 of these men had cognitive disabilities. Maybe something spooked them on that narrow road. Maybe a car blocked their way. Maybe in the confusion and the cold, their judgment fell apart and they made the worst possible choice. And then it was too late. But that theory never explains the first question. Why were they 50 miles up that mountain at all? The second theory points at Gary Mathias. The thinking goes that if he stopped taking his medication, an episode might have driven what the group did that night, or that he simply outlasted the others and wandered off. But there's no evidence he ever hurt anyone. These were his friends. And it doesn't explain why all 5 left the car together. The third is that phantom vehicle and the voices Joseph Shans heard. The idea that the men were frightened by someone up there and ran from the car to hide in the trees and got lost and never made it back. But when investigators chased that down, there was no one to find. And then there's the quietest, darkest answer of all. That 5 men made a chain of small, ordinary human mistakes in the cold and the dark. And the mountain did the rest. Every single theory leaves a hole you could drive a truck through. Why that road? Why leave the car? Why didn't Ted use the food that was right beside him? And where, after all these years, is Gary Mathias? 5 men went to a basketball game. They had a tournament in the morning. They had every reason to come home. Instead, 4 of them were found dead on a frozen mountainside, miles from a car they had no reason on earth to abandon. And the 5th one just walked off the edge of the world. The Yuba County Five was never solved. The files are full of facts and empty of answers. And somewhere up on that mountain, the truth about what made 5 friends walk into the dark is still up there, still waiting. So I'll leave it with you. What do you think happened that night? Tell me in the comments. I read them. All of them. I'm Gravenfield. The cases that were closed, but never solved. There's more right here, if you've got the stomach for it.